Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Blu-Roy Movies. Well, it's Sunday morning and time for the weekly watches. But first, I've got to feed this one. Do you want foodies? Do you want foodies? Come on. Right, guys. So I watched. Guess how many titles this week? You're probably getting it right if you're saying 7, because that seems to be the last 4 or 5 weeks. I've watched 7 titles. One a day. I'm nothing if not consistent. Right, we started off the week last Sunday. Now, Mrs. Blu-Roy texted me, even though we were both in the house, albeit on different wings of Blu-Roy towers, that the Annabelle 4 was coming out in cinemas soon, and could we go and see it? I pointed out the flaw in her plan that we hadn't seen the previous 3 films. So her reply to this was, right, okay, we've got to get them watched. So I started off the week with Annabelle. Annabelle. Now, what can we say about Annabelle? Out of this box set, I've watched all the first 3 Conjuring films, and Annabelle, for me, is by far the weakest film so far. I found it pretty boring and generic, and I was struggling to stay awake. It's all about this couple, they're expecting a baby, and they get home invaded by this couple that have been in some satanic cult. And the lady whose house it is, she collects these dolls, and she's got the Annabelle doll, and because this woman from the satanic cult bled onto the doll, it somehow becomes a conduit for evil and lets a demon into the house. Yep, that's how daft, that's how stupid it is. The only thing keeping me awake was there's a jump scare every couple of minutes, so it seemed like really quite lazy horror when you rely on that. And Mrs. Blu-Roy was nattering on through the film, but she informed me afterwards that was a tactic to keep me awake, which it worked. And tonight we're on to the next Annabelle film. Is it Creation? I think it's Creation. So I'm hoping that we might get an uptick in form, but I'm not that really looking forward to it. But you've got to keep Mrs. Blu-Roy happy, and I'll watch the other 2, and I'll go to the cinema with her. And I might even treat her to a bag of popcorn and maybe a bottle of pop, because ideal husband and all that. You know, it's difficult being a trophy husband, but we have to do it, I'm afraid. Yeah, that was the Conjuring. That was Annabelle. Yeah, not the greatest start to the week. Following on from that, and a huge better film was the Black Panther. Now, this was about a serial killer who was the most wanted man in Britain for a time in the 70s, called Donald Nielsen, not to be confused with Dennis Nielsen, another serial killer. My advice, if you get introduced to somebody called Nielsen, just watch what you're doing and maybe not get too friendly with them, because there's a pattern forming here. And Donald Nielsen, yeah, I can't believe that until I watched this film that I'd never heard of the guy, to be honest, because I've looked into it afterwards, the character, and he had quite a lot of notoriety at the time. I know I was only like a small boy, but you'd have thought like the annals of history would have carried this name on a bit more. But apparently this film is true to life. It's very accurate portrayal of the events. Now, Donald Nielsen, he was an ex-army guy, and I know some ex-army guys, and they're all a bit twisted. and he'd dress all in black and wear a black balaclava, and the press nicknamed him the Black Panther. And his main MO was he'd do jobs with a sawn-off shotgun on post office, and quite often, like, it was at a time when the post office and his wife and family would live above the post office, and a few times it ended up with Nielsen shooting dead the postmaster and other members of the family, and he killed quite a few people, and he was really cold and calculated and quite an evil character, very cold towards his family and cold in real life, and he'd plot his robberies out. And he's played by Donald Sumter, who did absolutely wonderful job, played him really, really well. And I'd only seen Donald Sumter, I think, in older times, sort of like Game of Thrones and stuff like that, where he's an old guy, and it's quite odd seeing him as a young chap. I always thought Donald Sumter was born old. But yeah, so he goes on doing these post office jobs and leaving a trail of dead bodies behind him, and then goes on to kidnap a teenage heiress and keep her held hostage down a big drain pipe type thing for days and days, and then it's the police search for this girl. And I won't tell you what happened if you don't know it, if you somehow not heard the story of this guy before like me. But really, really great film. One I've had in the collection for ages, and you kick yourself that you haven't seen them. Really highly recommend it. It is on YouTube, but you have to pay a couple of quid to watch it, but well worth dropping a couple of quid to watch it. Or I think it's still in print as well, so maybe even grab a copy. Yeah, really, really good. Really uptick on form from Annabelle. Yin and Yang, them two films. Wonderful. Got me Darth Vader cup today. Next up, and I was back into the Bette Davis box set, believe it or not. And last week's film, if you remember, I said it was okay, but not the best in the box set. This one, Deception, was a real return to form. A lot of these films seem to involve love triangles and Betty with a bit of devil in her, and she's back to her best in this one. This is all about Bette Davis's character. She discovers that a boyfriend, played by Paul Hendred, has returned from the war where he was feared dead. Now, it's not said what happened to him, but I think reading between the lines, I think he was Jewish and in a camp, and he's managed to escape. But Davis had presumed he was dead and got quite a shock when he returned. Now, he's a renowned international cellist, and while she thought he was dead, Davis started an affair with Claude Rains, who is a famous composer. Now, if you've seen Claude Rains and The Invisible Man, his character in that, he's got a devil in it, he's got blackness in him, and is pretty much playing the same character in this Claude Rains, and is absolutely wonderful in that as that sort of character. And Bette Davis doesn't want to let her boyfriend know that she had an affair with Claude Rains, so she's doing everything to keep it quiet. And Claude Rains is sort of blackmailing her and playing the two against each other, and sort of like letting him be the head cellist in his latest composition. And Betty knows that he's up to something. Will he spill the beans or not, or what happened between them in the past? And it goes into murder and all sorts. And yeah, really wonderful film. Like I say, real back into form with this box set. Now, that is the last one in this set. I've watched all 6 out of here. 5 absolutely fantastic films, and 1 that was good. I enjoyed it, but not as good as the others. So that's all 6 watched, and you may be saying, thank God for that. He's not going to rattle on about Bette Davis anymore. But I'll be starting on this other box set now, which has got 4 films that I think these are 4 are supposed to be a higher lights in a career. Mr. Skeffington, Dark Victory, The Letter, which a few of you guys have told me to get to, and now Voyager. I mean, I've heard of all them 4 films, and they're all supposed to be really good, so I think I'm going to have a hell of a time with that. Really enjoying my trawl through with Betty. Absolutely fantastic. I think she's sort of like yin-yanging with Marlene Dietrich now as my favourite actress. Yeah, absolutely awesome. And I followed that up with Psycho 2. Now, I know some people that prefer this over Psycho, and whilst it's good, a very worthy follow-up to the original Hitchcock masterpiece, if you think it's better than that, you're smoking crack. Sorry, guys. It's all right. It follows Norman Bates. He gets released from his psychiatric prison stroke hospital and given a clean bill of health, and he gets a job at a local diner. I love them American diners. I'd love to go to one day. They look really brilliant. And he settles back into the house, and then stuff start happening again. He starts getting phone calls from his mother and hear his mother's voice. Now, is it him going back to his old ways, or is it nefarious people around him making him think like that? That's what all the story's about. And yeah, it's worth a watch. Like I say, not a patch on the Psycho, but it's a decent follow-up. And I've now got 3 and 4 to watch. I've never seen them before. I'd watched this one before a long time ago. And I hear they're not as good as this, but we'll see how we get on with them. Yep, Psycho 2. Next up, A Man Called Horse. Richard Harris in a western about an English gentleman who's taking sort of a hunting adventure in the Old West. He takes along these 3 guys sort of to be, because he's quite an aristocratic guy. God, that was hard to say. I had to put my teeth in. And he takes along these 3 American guys to be like his valet and stuff like that for him. And one day they get invaded by the native Indians, and they kills his 3 companions and take him hostage. And he learns to become part of the tribe, and then eventually a chief. Now, I found it to be a bit of a film of 2 halves. The bit where he got captured and it was his struggles with them trying to escape, I really enjoyed. I thought it was brilliant. I thought Richard Harris was fantastic. But then when he started to get in with the tribe and making his way through, and a romance develops, it kind of lost me a bit. I kind of lost interest. So, yeah, the first half, brilliant. Second half, not so much for me. Reading a lot of the reviews, as I do on Letterboxd after I've watched a film, a lot of people complaining that the Native Americans were paid by white actors, and people just need to realise that that's what they used to do in them days. It's not worth losing your shit and threatening to boycott stuff, because it's just what happened. And it doesn't happen now, and probably rightly so, but it did. There's nothing you can do about it now. Don't let it affect your enjoyment of films. Just society today, it makes me laugh sometimes. Yeah, A Man Called... It was all right. Possibly, don't think when I'd watch again, maybe might look on moving it on. We'll see how we go. Then I followed that up with a really cool vampire film that I had seen before. Gemma Arterton, Saoirse Ronan in Byzantium, and I really dig this film. This is Gemma and Saoirse, I'm never really sure how to say that. They play mother and daughter vampires, and at this stage they're like 200 and something years old, and they've moved from town to town, keeping ahead of authorities, and this sort of cult of male vampires that are after these 2, because in this world only males are supposed to be vampires. And it's them keeping one step ahead of society, just not discovering that they're vampires. And this cult type organisation. And they happen upon the town. I don't think it's ever mentioned in the film what town it is, but it's actually filmed in Hastings. and they get in with this sort of a sad sack guy played by Daniel Mays, who you'd know his face is in all the sort of English like football hooligan films, and he lives in an abandoned guest house, so they move in with him and turn it into a brothel where they sort of hire these two Eastern European prostitutes and lure people in and make money that way so that they can move on to the next town. And yeah, I really enjoy it. It's a different vampire film. Vampires aren't made in the traditional way. There's this cave on this deserted island, on this really rocky island, where if you go in this cave, something happens to you and you become a vampire, which is a closely guarded secret amongst the vampires. Arterton, he wouldn't mind trying to have a go on me. Yeah, really good. She's some girl, isn't she, Gemma Arterton? And Saoirse, absolutely fantastic. She starts a relationship with this lad played by Caleb Landry Jones, I think his name is, who's always wonderful in whatever film he's in. Which, to the chagrin of her mother, she doesn't want to get him involved. That sort of drives a wedge between them. Yeah, really enjoyed this film. Really enjoyed the lore of it. Like, if some of me horror friends and subscribers on here haven't seen this one, I do recommend giving it a go, because I think it's quite an underrated film. Who's the director? Guy's name's got out of my head now. Neil Jordan. Director of Interview with a Vampire, so he's had previous with vampires. He knows what he's doing. Yeah, good stuff. Highly recommend that one. And last up, and film of the week for me, J.B. Priestley's book turned into a film. An Inspector Calls, directed by Bond director Guy Hamilton. Now, I remember at school in the early 80s, we read the book and watched the film, and about 1982, something like 82, 83, I was 13, 14. I was into Bond and Star Wars and shit like that. I wasn't interested in this, so I didn't think much of it at the time, but through adult eyes, what a wonderful film, and Alistair Sim, brilliant as ever. This is about Sim. He's a detective and he enters these rich people's house. There's 5 people living there, and this girl has committed suicide, and he interviews each of them, and each one of them has something to do with this girl's life that's made her turn to suicide. Yeah, look at social classes and who done it, and brilliant film. 5 stars on Letterboxd, which is rare. So that's it for the week, guys. What did you think? You seen any of them? Let me know down below. Give me a like if you've liked what I've done here today. Maybe think about subscribing, and I'll catch you all later. Ta-ra.